Good afternoon, YouTube, and welcome back once again to Fat Cat Collections. Today I'm doing another discussion video, and today it's about kind of like the tactics that some watch companies may or may not use against smaller microbrand companies. So I'm not going to disclose my source here on where this information came from. I want to be 100% clear and authentic that everything I'm about to say in this video is strictly my opinion and coming from an undisclosed source who is an owner of a very reputable, well-established microbrand watch company. And it's kind of about the dirty little tactics and kind of misconceptions we have and kind of the sleaziness that we have in the watch market / watch community. Now again, everything I say in this video is solely my opinions, and it's up to you to determine what you believe and what you don't believe. And of course, always buy what makes you happy. This isn't to shit on any particular brand. You guys know I'm a huge advocate for affordable watches, and I do think that there is a game being played in the watch community. So one of my contacts, and we're not going to disclose which one, of course, but one of my contacts who owns an awesome watch company. I've reviewed the watch company many times on this channel. It is just a fantastic brand. And we've gone back and forth for years kind of discussing what we see going on. And of course, remember, these are opinions. He does have some solid, legitimate proof based on his experiences. But to protect the people involved, we're not going to disclose who we're actually talking about. Just kind of think of this as a little short story, and we can't confirm or deny whether any of it's true or not. So take that into consideration when you're watching this content. So we all know that brands like Rolex and Omega and Seiko and these huge brands out there are big players in the watch world, right? And we all know that if you are a watch collector like myself of affordable brands, really any brand watch, I think we're all familiar with the Seiko NH35 movement. It's a movement I think most of us look for in a watch when we're looking for an automatic watch. Now, if you are a quartz fan, like I've mentioned many times, my pops always prefers a quartz because you don't have to worry about winding it, and you know if he wears it for a couple days and puts it away, wears it on special occasions. A perfect example is one of his automatic watches. He doesn't wear it all the time, so he'd rather just have a watch that he wears every single day and have that be quartz. It's nice to have both, of course, absolutely. Like I have many quartz, many automatics. But one thing that I think most of us agree, whether you are a watch snob or not, that we could all, I think, agree that the NH35 series movement is what I hate using the terminology, I hate using the lingo, but they call it a workhorse movement. Just like a lot of folks in the fragrance community, synthetic. Whenever you have inexpensive fragrance, oh, it smells synthetic. It's like people just throw these words and these terms around quite loosely. Now, there is truth to some cologne smelling synthetic, and there, of course, there are many movements out there, right? You can get basically no-name brand movements that, we can't confirm or deny whether or not they're going to last a long time or not. But like I say and joke about in many of my videos, this is not rocket science, right? These are movements have been around a very long time. They've been duplicated, they've been improved upon, they've been replicated, and ultimately, at the end of the day, they're all pretty decent, even if you get a no-name brand model. So what are kind of the main brands I think most of us look for? I know myself included, so I'm speaking for myself here. When I look at a watch, I say, what kind of movement, if it's an automatic, what kind of automatic movement does it have? Does it have a Miyota? Does it have a Seiko? Does it have an ETA? Does it have Valjoux? So, any of those brands, if I see the name brand movement, I feel a little more confident that I'm getting a quality automatic movement. That doesn't mean that when you buy a DHgate Special or something that doesn't have a branded movement, that it isn't a direct copy of that actual movement. Again, let's face it, there's not a lot of moving parts in a movement when you compare it to like an automobile. And so the fact that some of these watches cost thousands and thousands of dollars is just absolutely absurd. There was a time in which Swiss made meant something. There was a time in which you had to go with a big reputable brand to get a quality watch, but this is not the world we're living in right now, right? So you can rest assured that if you buy any old watch with any automatic movement, it's probably going to last you a very long time. There is not a guarantee with anything on any brand, right? So one movement, again, we're going to talk specifically about the NH series. The NH series movements, and a lot of folks, you probably know this already, but when we just Google NH series automatic movements, what we're going to get here, this is right on Google, it says there are 5 calibers of the NH series. The 35, the 36, the 38, 39, and the 70. All these calibers are part of the NH Basic Mechanical Series. These popular Seiko movements can be found on watches at various prices. This is directly off Google. This is coming from a website. I'm quoting Seiko Mods. So basically, my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here. My understanding is that on Seiko branded watches, they put a movement in there that's different than like an NH35. So if you were to buy a Seiko watch, you're not going to find an NH35 movement. You're going to find Seiko's equivalent caliber under the Seiko branding. Now, these movements, I believe, are 100% Seiko movements, but I've heard them referred to before as TMI. So when I just search, I'm just going to search one more thing. Who makes NH35, right? So it is referred to on Google as Seiko, right? And so sometimes you'll see that referred to, I believe, as TMI. And I think there are two companies that are actually, I guess, I think TMI is owned by Seiko. But again, don't quote me on that 100%. The point of this is not to decide or not to figure out who owns what, but we all know in the watch community that the NH35 is referred to as a Seiko NH35, right? And you can Google this and look this up on your own. This is pretty much common knowledge in the watch community. So when it comes to TMI and Seiko, TMI and S2 and TMI you'll see referencing the NH35 quite often. And so S2 and TMI are simply subsidiaries of Seiko Group. S2, or better known as Seiko Instrument Incorporated. So these movements are, of course, Seiko movements, right? I think we're all pretty aware of that. And so my story comes from, again, a gentleman who owns a watch company and recently has gotten threatened by Seiko Corporation to remove any reference to the word Seiko off his website for selling these Microbrand watches, which use a Seiko NH35 movement. Now, the reference is basically stating not that the watch is a Seiko under any circumstances, it's its own brand, but when listing the movement type, it specifically lists Seiko NH35. So with that being said, this company threatened legal action against this other company. And so what we believe and what my contact believes is that what these companies are doing, he's giving me other stories we're going to talk about as well, or some of these companies see these Microbrand watches as a threat. And so they don't want any reference to Seiko, because Seiko does have, whether you like the brand or not, I have no problem with Seiko, but Seiko has kind of built a brand name and a brand recognition that people trust. I hear it all the time. Oh, you could go get a Seiko, automatic watch, spend a little more, and it's going to be so much better than the Invicta, or better than this brand. And that's all just really hogwash. The reason why companies like Seiko, I believe, are trying to go after brands like this is because they're offering so much more watch with, in essence, the exact same movement you're going to get in a comparable watch with Seiko, but a lot more money, right? And so these companies are going after the smaller guy just to prevent them from using their name, right? Even though it falls under fair use, to the best of my understanding. So another interesting thing about what some of these watch companies are doing, and I'm going to read you directly here from my contact, and he says, let me explain, okay? He says, and this is a reputable brand here. Let me explain. This has been a tactic used by brands for price control since the start of the internet. It's kind of like a dirty little business. When this gentleman was in the closeout business, he would encounter this a lot. Brands would backdoor closeout goods, knowing that they would be sold on the internet, of course. Like, if a company's going to backdoor goods and sell them to different sellers, they're going to sell them on the internet, right? when they sold the price too low. So let's just say they have a bucket full of watches, right? They're going to sell them off, this big, huge brand, sell them off to other companies, little sellers who are going to sell this on their website. When they go ahead and get the watches for a great price, next thing you know, let's say the company normally tried to sell their watch for 200 bucks. They're like, we're not selling, we're going to backdoor these goods out to closeout companies, right? And next thing you know, they say, okay, well, we're going to sell you these goods for 150 bucks, right? Let's say 100 bucks. And then the company says, all right, great, well, I'm going to go ahead and try to sell these on my website. I'm going to charge 150. Then the company would turn around and pull this nonsense of trademark infringement to prevent them from selling the price too low, right? Because that puts competition in against their watch. So let's say, again, $200 for a watch. This company X is trying to sell that. They can't sell them. They close them out rock bottom price for like 50 bucks, let's say. Next thing the seller's like, hey, I think I can get 100. Now they put in this trademark infringement nonsense to get those listings kicked off sites like Amazon and eBay. Those are big time shopping malls, right? Digital shopping malls. And I've encountered it a lot too. On eBay, if you try to sell a watch and you reference that it's like Submariner or similar to Submariner, you can't even do any kind of comparisons, right? And that's kind of what happens on eBay. These sellers will try to sell, let's say, this particular watch reference Seiko NH35 movement because people are searching for that, and then Seiko comes along, or any other brand that is involved, and gets those things kicked off, right? To get competition. Now you get a watch much cheaper through this kind of third-party seller, right, or this secondary seller. So I'm going to read on here. He says here, with eBay and Amazon to get kicked off so they can price control the market, even though they sold the goods out with no particular price agreement, and you can't sell it without using the brand name, which falls under fair use. But eBay and Amazon will kick any brand owner will kick anything but brand owner. Sorry, this is a little bit written kind of weird here. Will kick anything brand owner asks because they do not want to be involved in legal issues. So I've seen that again, time and time again with eBay. I've had some homage watches that I just didn't wear over the years, and I say like Submariner or similar to Submariner, they'll kick the listing off. So you can't even reference that, and that's part of price control, right? They don't want you to sell these watches. So he gives another example here. So he says, for example, watch X with an NH34 movement is legally allowed to state that it has a Seiko movement. It's not infringing because it does have it, right? It's not infringing. It falls under fair or descriptive use, but eBay or Amazon won't take sides when it comes to that. They don't want any legal issues, so they just pull the listing right off. So legally, the easiest thing for them to do is to not interpret what's right or wrong, but just pull the listing to avoid any kind of complications. So that's really unfortunate for a lot of these other watch brands and sellers. He also goes on to state that as far as the outcome, this company does have listings on Amazon, but they aren't too worried about Amazon because it's less than 5% of their business. But Seiko starts going after our site as well, we'll have to take legal action if they were to go after their site to consumer, right? Big companies like Seiko and many others use bully tactics like that on smaller brands, figuring they can't afford a lawyer or don't know the law. And they know they don't have a trademark lawyer on retainer, whereas this company does, right? So they know what they can and cannot do. Again, I'm reading this directly from, this isn't, I can't confirm or deny this information. I'm sharing with you the experience from a well-known watch manufacturer. So with that being said, this is kind of like, again, what I talk about many times when it comes to, the price on watches, right? These big, huge players out there, you can pick any brand. I'm not specifically stating one brand over another, but they don't want the smaller companies making watches that are superior or at least as good for a fraction of the cost. And as time goes on, as guys like myself start to get more watches on the channel and really side by side compare these. And now I don't always have, I don't have a Rolex watch to compare it to. I have one Seiko, but it's an older Seiko. But I'm always looking and getting my hands on stuff. And I can wholeheartedly tell you, I don't see a lot of difference across brands. And I mention every video because when you're trying to do a video, I'm trying to show you guys these cool watches and give you guys the price points in hopes that you do buy them, add them to your collection if it's something that checks your check boxes. But at the end of the day, it's just not all about price. But it's safe to assume if you pay $2,000 for an Aquadive watch, which I own, and that's the price, right? That's not like overinflated. That's what they sell for. And you compare that to like a $200 Pro Diver or an Aragon, you're not getting much more for your money. You might get better lume. In all honesty, when I compare these watches, that's the only thing I can really see that it has better lume on some of these watches. The rest, the fit, the finishing, the ability to tell time accurately, you just don't get all this extra for your money. And the argument is always that you have to spend a ton of money to get an accurate, high quality watch, an heirloom piece that you can pass down. And they make this argument that like, oh, you can pass it down because it's going to last you forever. And they paint this picture, they plant the seed to a lot of folks who don't know any better that, oh, well, these other watches are just complete dog shit. And this is, you know, I'm not going to get this. This is an heirloom. I can't pass this down. It's not going to last forever. When frankly, these watches most likely will last longer than you, right? And so that's just the way it is. Now I'm going to put a link in description, and there is a article he shared called Oracle of Time, and it discusses one specific movement. I'll put that in description. You can read about it and drop a comment, tell me what you think about some of these tactics being used. And again, I can't confirm or deny, you know, any of this information. I'm sharing with you what is being shared with me based on this particular company's experience. I'm going to read you something else too. And so part of this kind of back and forth comes from, I'm going to read you what he wrote, and you can kind of draw your own conclusion. He says, this company is no way affiliated or a division of S2 of the Seiko Corporation. S2 is a division of the Seiko Corporation. If a watch contains a Seiko, in this case, the watch contains a Seiko S2, Seiko movement, per the S2 website. S2 was put into use in 1990 and is an official acronym of Seiko Instruments Incorporated. So, Seiko, right? The movement inside this particular timepiece is marked S2 by Seiko. That's a correct description of what's in the watch. It's an S2 movement by Seiko. Seiko owns S2, right? It's a subsidiary. The trademarks for S2 and Seiko are the sole property of the Seiko Corporation. Or use of the word Seiko is not a trademark use, but a descriptive use. So remember, they're not stating that this watch is a Seiko, but it's a descriptive use on what's in the watch. It's like for these guys who turn around and like maybe put a Ferrari engine in a, you know, in an old Chevelle or something. Like we see all kinds of crazy things on the internet. By them listing the fact this has a Ferrari V8, you're not stating that the car is a Ferrari. You're stating this is the motor in the car. So it is a description of the property being sold, in that case being, you know, produced, but in this case being sold. The word Seiko is not a trademark, but a descriptive use as covered by trademark fair use doctrine. The fair use exception is recognized throughout most of the world. This disclaimer was placed due to recent attacks upon this company by Seiko, where they attempted to get our listings of these particular timepieces removed off a third-party venue for the use of the word Seiko. That was used in the description faction that allowed them to do this by law. Our conclusion was that the Seiko Corporation likely selling millions of movements per year, and we see these movements in all kinds of microbrand watches, right? Invicta, Aragon, Nubeos, lots of Dartmouth brands. I mean, they're everywhere. We all know this as watch collectors and as watch enthusiasts. And so what he states here is that they're selling millions of these movements per year to third-party watch brands for use in builds, knowing that they will be sold online, and description will contain the word Seiko as describing the movement in the watch, which is what it has, and they still decide to go after these companies. So that's, to me, really sleazy. These companies are your customer. You're making Seiko movements. They're selling these. They're making money. But then when you try to make an amazing watch using that movement, they don't want you to use that. They'd rather you just say, most likely, automatic movement, right? Or, you know, it's just really, to me, pretty sleazy and pretty disheartening, right? So this company says, hey, we take this as a compliment because they feel threatened by our great product specs and pricing. And we view their actions as forms of price control and anti-competition and antitrust in nature. It's a violation of U.S. law. Selling movements out to third parties know that they will go in other brands and attack them once those brands are covered under trademark infringement, because they don't like the price or specs when they compare it to their own watches. So this is kind of interesting. Again, remember, these are opinions. We can't confirm or deny this, but it is interesting that this is kind of the actions that larger companies will take on smaller brands. And what kind of conclusion can we make from that? Well, if these smaller brands are making incredible watches for a fraction of the cost, they don't like that, right? I'm sure brands like Seiko, even though they're selling these movements out to millions of different companies using them in watches, you know, you have to rely almost on this lie that when you look at a $69 Pro Diver with an NH35, and then you have watch snobs on the internet saying, oh, we'll spend a little more and get the Seiko. When I've had tons of people on here tell me that, hey, you know, this watch at $69 is nicer than the Seiko counterpart. So remember, watch collecting and what you consider good or bad is within reason subjective, right? We can still state that a watch has the same movements, right? But these other watch brands, these other watch snobs, these shills, will then pick the watch apart that is not the actual, you know, brand they're defending, because they know that you're getting an incredible value and it's a much better value. Why would somebody spend $400 on this particular watch when you can get one for a fourth the price that has the same movement? What are we going to pick apart here? You know, are we going to pick apart the materials? What if it's 3/16 stainless steel? Now they have to make it, oh, the bezel, you know, and I get it. Sometimes the loom is definitely something where, and I call it out all the time, like you get a $69 Pro Diver and the loom, it's not very good in my opinion, right? But you compare that to like an Geneva or an Aqua Dive or what else? Many other RGMT watches using like tritium and stuff like that. It just depends on the watch. Even like Steel Dive, the loom is superior, right? So these are actual tangible things, things that we can actually see, things that we can actually feel, but most of the time there's not a lot of difference. So these brands have to kind of attack smaller brands because they are a threat, my opinion. And this gentleman's opinion. So again, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to me talk about that. I hope you enjoyed kind of the story. And remember, at the end of the day, it's very important for you to get your hands on watches. You know, get your hands on, if there's a watch you're considering buying, look what people who collect many watches say about them, right? I've seen guys that I really like too, and some people do make a mountain out of a molehill. They nitpick. When I start picking up watches, like, what do we got here? A couple new ones you guys are going to see, like this Shield, or the Dartmouth brand, this Nubeo, this Duxo. When I start comparing these watches to other watches in my collection, there's price points all over the place, right? Some are $5, some are $1,000, some are $2,000, some are $100. What is the difference? And ultimately, at the end of the day, brands who charge a lot more for their products need to create a lot of times what I consider they're like false narratives, or they're considered almost like these manufactured desires, like that this sapphire crystal is superior, when really at the end of the day, when we're looking at the basic checkboxes I love to mention is, let's put aside number one, do you like it? Does it call to you, right? Number two is, what is it made out of? Is it 3/16 stainless steel or is it not? If it is, then there's really no difference. After that, you know, what kind of crystal? You know, is it sapphire or is it, you know, flame fusion or K1? Again, just because you have sapphire doesn't mean that the other one's super you're going to scratch it really easy. It just doesn't work that way. They're both very scratch resistant. Yes, sapphire is going to be more scratch resistant, but at the end of the day, like, in order for you to scratch either, it takes an incredible amount of effort to do that, right? And so it's just kind of really a manufactured desire that really is not something you need. Just like when we talk about 904, you know, I joke all the time, you're going to be a mermaid, you're going to live at the bottom of the ocean, you're going to become a crab, you know, scavenging the ocean, wearing your submariner. You know, that material is really designed to be used in industrial type settings. So it's not really something where it's really needed for specific reasons. It's not really needed in a watch. It's a manufacturer desire. It's something that they say, oh, look at this is better. But what is the feature? What is the action? What is the benefit? It doesn't give you really any benefit, in my opinion. Just like when you spend more money on this particular movement, right? What are you doing? Are you just sitting at your desk with your NH35? Or are you being a little more abusive? Are you banging the hell out of the watch? Are you diving? At the end of the day, they all tell time pretty well. So all this stuff is really just nonsense in my opinion. And again, just follow the check boxes, be a smart shopper, and ultimately buy what you like and what you can afford. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, folks, and take care.